So when we look at an organization and they're building a new sustainability strategy, and they're looking uh, to embed it, put it all in place, um, you can have real problems, I guess, if you don't have the correct assurance and governance and control systems put in place to actually make sure that you embed them properly, that it has time to actually, you're saying with Marks and Spencer's it took 10 full years for it to
Mm,
actually start to
did.
bear fruit. So unless you have those systems in place to defend your strategy, then it's going to fall over, isn't it? So talk a little bit about that, how organizations leave themselves exposed if they don't actually robustly bed those systems in, Mark.
Yeah, and again, this is this is quite a complicated topic and quite a complicated question, because when businesses look at things like sustainability and other strategies as well, or environmental social governance, they think, okay, let's put an environmental plan in, let's make sure the staff do good charity work and da 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 da. But they don't think holistically about how somebody else will look at it. So more often than not, what brings these things down is the external lens. Now, for larger businesses, and I'll just mention a couple of technical points. The regulations have been around since 2019. I think Boris Johnson put those mandatory, first one in the world to put in legal mandatory reporting requirements under the listing rules for listed companies, and then they put them in place for large companies over 500 million, 500 staff. Those regulations in terms of reporting are now cascading down under the new rules called UK SRS, and we'll see those come out in 27. They've already been agreed for listed companies from January 27, and it's a big step change. And this is an important point for those listening who might think, it doesn't bother me, it's listed companies, don't need to worry about any of that. Wrong. I'll tell you for why. So those companies are mandated to look at their emissions, to look at their the way in which they conduct themselves, society, and also the way in which they manage it. Now, with emissions, Scope 1 is your own, effectively, gas, combustion, stuff that you have yourselves. Scope 2 is electricity. But Scope 3 is everything else. Now, no one's got this right. And you look at the stream. So you have your, right at the very top, so let's take the food industry because it's my world. Your food producers, your farmers, which is the upstream, all the way down to effectively the person that eats it. And all of that chain will create emissions, right? And those emissions, whether that's their electricity or their oil and gas or whatever, becomes that listed company's Scope 3 emissions, because they have to report mandatorily 1 and 2, and under the new rules, likely Scope 3, which means they have to ask you for it.
I would say in my book, in my recent book, I talk about a phenomenon, well, something that I observed around transition. Organizations are looking to move from point A to point B over a period of time, and I created this sort of a 5-phase stage for transitions. So, and the stages were, just very briefly, was about compliance and reporting, where people felt relatively comfortable with that. They brought the staff in for doing that. They had the CSOs in place. They were making the right announcements. They were producing the sustainability reports. I mean, some of these sustainability reports are a work of art. And they are 200 pages plus, and I'm thinking, well, do we still need a strategy document? They just put everything. But anyway, that's enough for another conversation. I'm not my expert area, but I'm just saying that they look very nice and glossy. And then I would say the next part is the need to speak to people outside of the environment, the external organization. So I'm talking about forming strategic partnerships. That's a very important thing in this day and age, and now with the technology around us. So how can we form strategic partnerships with the right people? And I just find there are so many sources of helping you do networking and find strategic partnerships. There is something out there in this sustainability space, and I spoke to an organization that were trying to model the space, because what is sustainability? Where are the boundaries? And I think that it's just an open thing. So moving on, the third area is very important, is to create value creation, which we've talked about today. That has got to be shown very, very, very clearly through what we've said. And then the next phase is implementation, probably worth another discussion on its own, but implementation, Let's leave it there. That's a big problem. The thing I've taken away just recently from speaking to people is that the implementation problem may not be bigger than the sustainable strategy creation side. So what I'm saying, if you've got a weak strategy, it's nothing to do with implementation because you've just got a weak strategy. So you can't just say I've got an implementation strategy. You got to look back to your sustainable strategy and make sure that it's fit for purpose. I don't see many places actually evaluating the sustainable strategy, i.e. the quality of it, as they used to evaluate the quality of strategic planning back in the past. Anyway,
Just on that, could I ask you a question, Rob?
Yeah.
Paul, how have you seen businesses evaluate the quality of their strategies in the past then around sustainability? Because I think it's a really tough question to answer. I won't say what I've seen, but I just like really get your view on that.
well, I would say that what I have seen and what I have done, two different things. I mean, what I have seen, people use a lot of proxies. It's a bit like when you have performance and you have the black box. So nobody knows what's inside the black box. They look in what goes before you get into the black box and what you have as an outcome to look at the quality. But that's obviously not really good because you're not dealing with causation, for example. Just because something is doing very well, you don't know why it's doing well. So from an academic research, a lot of problems there. But for me, I mean, I was looking at the quality part in my doctoral stuff way back, and it's about actually going into the organization, sleeves up, and getting under identifying the key processes. As one of my professors would say, it's about process-based management. It's kind of disappeared, but if you don't understand your processes, then and the trouble is, strategy is a qualitative process. So everybody has their little proxy and way of doing it. And I think that's a huge area, like something that interests me from coming through stuff. But anyway, the last part is an important part: institutional impact. This is very important in public sector organisations. That's how they live and breathe. It's about the impact that they make. If they don't make the right impact, then they don't get funding anymore. Organisations is also about impact. And it's not about profit. It's about making, and Mark touched upon this, making the right. He talked about the societal company, and MHA is a nice place to work. They behave.
It is. Yeah,
This bit is getting lost in organisations, and some people would say to me that some organisations do something completely different and doing very, very well. But again, another conversation on that one.